Friends, we are very happy to inform you that e-modules are prepared for B.Ed program at Telangana by the School of Education, Osmania University under Pandit Madan Mohan Malaviya National Mission on Teachers and Teaching Scheme MHRD New Delhi. It's indeed our pleasure to share with the teacher educators and the prospective teachers and get maximum benefit out of it. It's a first of its attempt by us. We continue to add many more such lessons to share with you all.
Namaskar, I'm Dr. Yakaiah, lecturer from NSR College of Education, Hyderabad, Telangana, India. The topic today we are going to discuss is about differently abled and inclusive education. To begin with, what is differently abledness, or who are differently abled children? What is inclusive education? How the needs of these differently abled children can be met without any discrimination in inclusive classroom. These are things we are going to cover in today's session. So, to begin with, if we look at the title of the day's presentation, types of differently abled learners and meeting their educational needs in inclusive classroom. So, here I draw your attention to look at those two keywords, differently abled and inclusive education or inclusive classroom. Vis-a-vis, let us see what are educational needs. Alright. To begin with, who are differently abled learners? What is this different abledness? In a typical classroom, as teachers, we all are aware there are three categories of children: the above average, average, and below average. This is traditionally each and every teacher recognizes invariably in his or her classroom. But if you closely look, are all these above average one and the same, or the below average one and the same? For that matter, even all average children are one and the same? No, definitely we all understand that the individual differences exist. They are there in abilities, their capacities, their achievement levels, their performance, interest, you name anything. So, therefore, this differently abled are defined as those who deviate from the average and require special educational equipment, method, or material to meet their educational needs. Now, I want to draw your attention towards three important aspects of this differently abledness. First thing, they do deviate from this so-called average or the normal. If you take academic achievement as a criteria, now when we say differently abled, we are not talking about average achievers of 40 to 60% or 70%. Then who are the differently abled from achievement standpoint of view? Are those children who perform extremely well, 80 plus, 90 plus, almost 10%, or who fall below that minimum pass mark, let's say 35-40%. Similarly, if you look from physical abilities point of view, all those who have the body organs in normal and those who deviate in any one or more parts of their body, like physically challenged, locomotor challenged, visual ability, visually challenged, hearing ability, auditory, speech and language challenged. Now, if you could recollect out of your understanding, previously you might have heard the words called exceptional children, deviant children, disabled children, all right. But please note that there is a difference when we call differently abled. When you call physically challenged or mentally challenged disabled, we are only looking at about their deficiency part of their abilities. But the beauty, the moment when you call differently abledness is, it covers both the positive deviation as well as the negative deviation. And at the same time, let me tell you, especially who are all these differently able. It's not just limited, it includes differently abled children, includes physically, mentally, emotionally, socially deviant, but not limited. You have several categories. Before we name them and identify and understand, let us see who are differently abled children. Look at this definition. Children, those who deviate from normal or average in abilities, interests, learning needs are known as children with different learning needs or differently able learners. Hope you have identified some important words. First one in the first line you look at there, that is children those who deviate from normal or average. So when we are talking about differently able, we are not talking about the regular normal bunch of that average or normal children. Either you have a positive deviation or you have a negative deviation. So that's one fundamental this thing, all right. And then similarly, children whose educational needs can be met effectively through special methods or materials known as differently able learners. As I have already hinted at in my introductory part, yes, suppose if somebody comes and says, yes, everybody hand is like this, my hand can move only up to 45 degrees, it can't move 90 degrees or 180 degrees. So therefore, it can move only 45 degrees like this much. Can we simply call them differently abled? No. Why? Even in your Disability Act, there is a minimum of 40% of deficiency or deformity is there, only then they are recognized as physically challenged or otherwise different categories. From educational point of view, what we say, all those children who can be educated along with your regular normal class, whose educational needs can be met with your regular teacher, regular methods, regular materials, are still average or normal group. Now what is that differently abled group we are talking about? We are referring those whose needs cannot be met with your normal regular school class teacher methods materials. Therefore, they may require a special teacher or they may require a special material, something like a book, amplifying glass or hearing aid, language training, speech therapy, physiotherapy, or emotional counseling, behavioral therapy, any of this. So that's the reason we have used, look at the special methods or material. So this is the fundamental criteria based on which. Now look at this classroom, you see, you have children of different categories. There are physically challenged children, there are intellectually challenged children, there are hearing and auditory and other categories. So how many types of differently abled learners are there is one fundamental question to ask to begin with. Now let's see. Yes, there are several categories of differently abled, but in a broad categories we can put like this: physically challenged, right? All those your locomotor challenged, hearing challenged, visually challenged, all belongs to this broad category. Then mentally challenged, today we also call them intellectually challenged. That's the latest terminology used, right? Okay, then academically backward, so that far below 30%, 40%, hardly they pass in any subject or in one or more subjects. Gifted or creative, yes, as I said, it is not just physically, mentally challenged or low academic achieving children. Differently able is a broader connotation which includes different categories of children. So therefore, even gifted, creative, socially disadvantaged. Who are those socially, economically, culturally deprived, disadvantaged? All right, emotionally disturbed, children coming from broken families, orphan families, okay, or children coming from prolonged diseases. All these belongs to the socially disadvantaged, because when you compare with the other human beings, they have some disadvantage from the social perspective of it. Similarly, learning disabled, another newly recognized and much now known category is learning disabled. If some of you are wondering, very new to this term, let me give you a brief here is academically backward, the above you see, yes. If a student consistently failing in 3, 4, 5 or all the subjects, hardly gets 30-40%, not more than that, he is academically backward. But Contrast to that, learning disabled are interestingly achieve 70s, 80s, even 90s in other subjects, definitely above average 60, 70, 80s. But in only one subject, maybe in maths, maybe English, maybe language, Telugu, Hindi, social studies, it can be. It's not confined to only maths, English traditionally as we know. It can be any of the one or more areas. If technically it is defined as learning disabled are those, or they are also called as learning difficulties, or children requiring having special learning needs. These are the different terminologies used. In all, the criteria is if a child has a problem in reading, writing, arithmetic, speech and language, one or more of these areas, they are called learning disabled or learning difficulties, or children with specific learning needs. Okay. Rest of the categories I am sure you are all familiar. And the last one category before we move on, let us see what is that. Multiple disabilities or multiple challenged. That is the latest term we do use. Alright. So, who are these multiple challenged? The one who have more than one of these categories. If a intellectually challenged, that is mentally challenged child also has got a locomotor issue, or also has got a something hearing problem, visual problem, then we say more than one category, they are called multiple disabilities. Now come, let us visit one of the class where you have included all these differently abled children. Look at those two teachers facilitating these children. Some of they have intellectual challenges, that is mentally challenged, some of they have visual issues, some of they have auditory issues, some of they have speech and language issues, some of they have from a different cultural and linguistic background. Let us say the school is an English medium, they do not understand English. What they know is only Telugu or only Hindi, only Urdu, only Marathi, Kannada, Gujarati, something, let us say. They are born and brought up in only in that particular language. Now they are pushed to English medium school for one reason or the other. Probably better not discuss those causes here, I understand. So in that case, they require special support. They require special attention. Rather, they require totally a different method to teach that particular subject to those children, which is a bit different from that of the others. Under such circumstances, what do we do? So before we discuss that, let us look at some of the important points, misconceptions and proper conceptions as far as differently abled is concerned. Look at the point 1. Note that it includes but not limited to physically or mentally challenged children. What are we talking about? Differently abled. When we refer differently abled, it is not that only physically or mentally challenged we are talking. Similarly, it covers wide range of children from physical, intellectual, social, emotional, educational, etc. spectrum. Spectrum, right? Whole range of categories of children. All right. Okay. Similarly, again, it is not just limited to those broad categories. Rather, it also includes all these children. Look at this: street children, orphans, child labor, delinquents. You know, delinquents, children who are in conflict with the law, knowingly or unknowingly, they might have committed some punishable crime under Indian Penal Act, but they didn't do it with any intention. Let us say you all know below 18 years, children below 18 years, how do they dealt with law? Not like the other adults. They dealt in a separate manner where most is educative and rehabilitative methods rather than reformative punishing aspects part of it. All right. Then children under armed conflict, migrated and refugees, prolonged diseases, physically, mentally challenged, multiple challenged, etc. So all these categories belongs to differently abled. Now look at here, you could see street children who doesn't have at least proper shelter, food, clothing and education, probably you can think. Now when one among that child enter your classroom, do you think the same regular, normal, average approach as a teacher you and I follow will be sufficient or suitable for these children? No. At the same time, please note that I am not talking you treat them as a separate in a discrimination deviant manner. No, we are going to see that second half called inclusive education. But teacher needs to recognize them, understand them. They come from a different socio-cultural and economic background, and therefore they need certain support, maybe in method or material or the way how you deal, etc. See, most of the probably street children will be living on this abandoned vehicles or railway station, bus stands, or abandoned houses, old buildings, so on and so forth. Orphans. So, who are the orphans? As we are all aware, if a child is not having one parent or both the parents, they are known as orphans. Now, about the orphans, because if one of child in your classroom is an orphan, the routine regular methods whenever you say bring your parents, unconsciously or commonly in routine you do say like that. Okay, or take the help of your parents, and then he is blank. Where are my parents? Oh, I don't have parents, how to? So, therefore, what teacher can do? Having awareness and sensitivity probably can help those children who are orphans, guide them, support them, give that emotional support or the guidance that is required. Probably which is not a substitute for the parents, but at least in absence of the parents, teacher is aware, and that makes a lot for the child to move on and his educational needs are met. Another category belonging to differently abled is child labor, as we have mentioned previously. Look at that, we all know we have child labor laws preventing that, prohibiting that children should not be engaged in economic activity which deprives their childhood, which deprives their education, which deprives their life, future prospects of development. So, under the age of 18, 21, according to various activities, children are not supposed to be. But we know for various reasons, out of school children, dropout children, children who are orphans, children who are in need and care, and all that are engaged in different kinds of activities even today in very small numbers, remote pockets, but still it's an issue. But in reality, ground reality, in field reality, we have children today, unfortunately, some are still working as child laborers. And upon that, the pity is some of they are engaged in hazardous industries as well, like glass industry, paint industry, crackers industry, cement industry, construction work. You know, that's a health hazardous. Even adults, matured adults are prone for hazards. And as such place, children walking is so dangerous. And if one of such child is rescued from there and brought back and put in your classroom, you as a teacher dealing with that child need this understanding. He is differently able, not just physically, mentally challenged. Or what does he needs? Maybe some foundation in academics, maybe some emotional support, maybe some guidance and counseling needs he has, which are different from that of the other children. So, therefore, if teacher can be sensitive to that, we are able to meet the needs of differently abled of different categories in regular classroom, which is otherwise known as inclusive education, which we are going to discuss in detail after a few minutes. So, let us continue with some more categories of differently abled. You see here you have one more category by name delinquent children or juveniles they are known as. The system that deals with the children who are under the age of 18 years who are in need of care and protection or in conflict with law. So, here I would like to stress on these two words. Please note the distinction between these two. All juveniles are not the one, or children dealt with juvenile justice are not the one involved in some or other activity which is punishable according to Indian Penal Code. There are two broad categories under this. Yes, some children are in conflict with the law, some children who are in need of care and protection. That is the reason you will have two types of homes for these children, special homes and general homes or the normal homes. Special homes for those who are in conflict with the law, and this observation homes or general normal homes for those who are in need of care and protection. What does this mean, who are in need of care and protection? Let's say assume today in Hyderabad railway station one child is found who is around 11 years and not able to speak Telugu, Hindi or English. He speaks some unknown language which is commonly spoken in Hyderabad, Telangana or AP, and who is unable to give his home address, parents' details. He says, I don't know, I don't have anybody, I just got into the train and the last night I dropped there and police brought me here. That much max what he can say. Then where do you keep that child? Whom are you going to hand over? How the legal system is going to deal with that child? So now he falls under, he did not commit any crime that's punishable under Indian Penal Code. So therefore, now such children are called or known as children in need of care and protection. So under this juvenile justice system, we are going to deal with these two kinds of children. If one of such child is attending your school or you are a teacher in one of the juvenile homes, how do you deal with them? What kind of care do you take? What methods are you going to use? How are you going to meet their needs in terms of their educational needs, day-to-day living needs, and so on and so forth. So therefore, there is a need to look at this particular category of children as children in need of care and protection, or otherwise delinquent children or juvenile children, in the juvenile homes. All right. Now let's move on the other category, under differently abled children under armed conflict. So are those children under armed conflict? Children under armed conflict are those children living in those border areas where this war like situation is prevailing. Now particularly once a war between India and any of the neighboring countries is broke or about piling up such situation. Now look at those school children, whether to go to school or not. If they go, what about their safety? Like now these days during this COVID-19 situation, we all have experience for a span of period. How horrible it is. Now interestingly, though option is given either you can attend online or offline, my children says, no, I want to go back to school. I'm missing for 10 months. 10 long months. How much they love. But under armed conflict situation, they will not be able to go. Their security is at stake. At the same time, for that reason, they can't afford to lose their education. Now, how do you deal with? Probably at times more than your academic lessons, their emotional stability and building up their resilience, motivating them and telling them preventive measures, taking care in case of unexpected outbreak of the fire, what to do, how to do, and all that also is a part of schooling, it's a part of education. So if you want to include those children also, if really your classroom is to be inclusive, truly inclusive, you need to take care, you need to have an awareness of these children as well. Similarly, migrated and refugees. Rural to urban, very common phenomena across pan India. Anywhere you see, from rural remote areas, the urban areas, people are migrating. Similarly, refugees, border Bangladeshi refugees, you have Tibetan refugees, all right, in the borders of our country, again you have refugees. And that country refused to take them back, and we also don't have any legal proof that they belongs to this country. Now ultimately they are remained as refugees, who are not having, like you and me as a citizen of India, to full-fledgedly enjoy all the constitutional and civil rights and citizens provisions. Now when you are dealing with such children, again you need to take care. Similarly, prolonged diseases, for example the cancer, for several months they are not able to attend. HIV AIDS affected children. Now when such child is attending, or you are one of the counselor or the teacher at such special centers or residential centers or the schools where these children are educated, now how are you going to deal with? That matters, which needs for us to understand their different ableness and to deal accordingly. All right. Similarly, as I told, prolonged diseases, which also includes HIV, AIDS. All right. Now, otherwise, we are all familiar under this differently abled, or earlier we used to call disabled. Now we are calling them differently abled, Divyangajan. Okay, Divyangulu. So these are the different terminology in different languages, but ultimately are those which includes a large chunk is your physically challenged. Okay. So therefore, you could see here the physically challenged, locomotor challenged there in the left first picture. You could see on the right here hearing challenged. All right. Similarly, now does that mean they don't have abilities? No. Invariably, they do have abilities. What is the difference? They are differently able. Now you see, we have the Special Olympics these days, which means at national, international level they can perform, they can project their abilities. Only difference is differently abled. All right. So that we need to check. Now let's see what is this inclusive education. In the beginning we have said today's session has two parts, the differently ableness and meeting their needs in a regular classroom, that is inclusive education. What is inclusive education? How it can meet their needs? Now let's spare few minutes before we conclude on this important aspect as well. That's inclusive education. Now you see, crossing the divide. Normally in a school or a building, when you want to enter, what do you have at the gates is normally steps. Yeah, convenient, required, undoubtedly. But if a child comes with a something like that, a wheelchair, now he cannot be included there. So therefore, if you also have a ramp or alternatively what is called the lift, that kind of provision, yes, these children also along with can go. So we are talking about crossing the divide, which helps for inclusive education. In another word, in a classroom where the normal children or these differently abled children together educated without any deviation, discrimination, we call it inclusive education. So let's see the most commonly accepted definition or the concept of inclusive education. Look at here, inclusive education means that all students attend and are welcomed by normal regular schools in age appropriate regular classes and are supported to learn, contribute and participate in all aspects of the school life. Now, I want to draw a 3 or 4 important terms in this in order to understand inclusive education in its true spirit. Point 1, look at there, the first line, inclusive education means that all students, number 1, it is all inclusive. Inclusive education is fundamentally all inclusive. Now, some of you may be wondering, our government schools already are inclusive, sir. It welcomes anybody and everybody. But you also have government special visually challenged schools, hearing challenged schools, which means, yes, there is some discrimination. Because you have visual challenge, you go to this school. Because you have hearing challenge, you go to this school. Of course, initially with a very good intention of training them educationally, vocationally and rehabilitation as a special facility we have created. We have moved far, now world is in a position where we are able to talk about human rights, child rights, non-discrimination against various human characteristics. So from that point of view, it is all inclusive, not that, and are welcomed by normal regular schools in age appropriate regular classes. If a child dropped out 5 years back from a third class, 5 years back what was his age? 8. Third class normally 3 plus 5, 8 years. Now dropped back 5 years. Now current age is 13. Now when he comes back to school, if you make him to sit in the 4th class, this student age is 13 years. Average 4th class children age is 9 years. Now how it would be? It doesn't match. Now, though physically is included in the class, emotionally, socially is excluded. So, what to do? You have an alternative, something like a bridge course where you orient and because 13, if not 8th class, 6th or 7th class, you make him to start with study back. Such arrangements we are talking about, ultimately to integrate in the normal regular classroom who can continue his regular studies. Alright. And the last important aspect is not only academic when we are talking academic inclusion of schooling. Alright. What else? Supported to learn, contribute and participate in all aspects of the school life. Accessing laboratories, library, games, sports, cultural activities and so on, all activities. Some of you may be wondering, sir, you bring all varieties of differently abled children and all activities. If child himself decides, I don't want this, that's only the exception. Otherwise, you should allow anybody and everybody. Suppose, let us say, you have a Braille class in the 7th period, that's the last, let us say, last period of your school, and you also have caroms, chess. Now, children can go to any of their interest. Now, if you say because you have visually challenged, you go to Braille class, no, you are discriminating. But you give a chance, this child chooses to play chess rather than the Braille, learn Braille, we allow. Why? In all aspects of the school life, in admission, in academics, in co-curricular activities, in all other fields of their participation is welcome and allowed and encouraged without any discrimination with reference to their differently ableness or disability, if any. That's the true spirit of inclusive education. Now, look at this classroom. You have the sighted children, you have visually challenged children, you are hearing challenged children, even intellectually challenged children are there in that classroom which we are talking of. That's inclusive education. Now, what is the difference? See, visually challenged, he prefers the Braille printed script book, he is provided that. The immediate to him, next right to him, you see, that child is going through another normal textbook. According to their needs, according to their abilities, we provide. That's the beauty of inclusive education. Now, why and how? What is the importance of this inclusive education? Don't we have some challenges? Definitely, we do have challenges. We do have several limitations and constraints. I am not unaware of the classroom reality. But in spite of that, the simple fundamental principle for inclusive education, please read there. You could see that children who learn together live together. Simple fundamental principle is because tomorrow where these visually hearing, locomotor or otherwise deviant children are going to live, do you have a special society like special school? No. End of the day in their life they have to live with the same society. You and I, we all are living together. And this living together begins when they learn together. And several studies reported that, it's found that not only the differently abled children get benefited, even normal children also get benefited a lot because even they too learn to live together with different kinds of people. The social deviation, social discrimination already has brought a long way us to discriminate into various groups, lack of that brotherhood, lack of that understanding between one human being and another human being can be bridged if we educate them in an inclusive environment. So, with these brief thoughts, I would like to briefly review before we conclude. Today we have seen that differently abled are those who deviate from the normal or the average, requiring special method or material to meet their educational needs, which includes physically, mentally challenged but not limited to that, also includes the socially deviant, emotionally deviant, the health prolonged disease children, also those juvenile children, street children, migrant children, refugees, children in the armed conflict and so on so forth categories. So, it is important for the teacher to understand them, identify them, as far as possible provide in the regular normal classroom what do they require to cope up along with the other children. But in exceptional case where it is highly impossible to meet their needs along with that, even then the concept of inclusive does not allows to discriminate, But as a supportive services, if the child choose to take that service, we provide that additional training or service. For example, the sign language or braille script training, or using cane for the locomotor challenge. This kind of are we call supportive services, not an integral part of their education. We provide that, but all other aspects of, without any discrimination, all aspects of school life is to be continued in the same normal regular school. Now the fundamental question arises is, it's okay regular school, regular classroom, but who is the teacher? Is that regular teacher going to handle effectively this classroom? Definitely I understand the limitations, but inclusive education does not recommend a special teacher to teach all this. Support services of special teacher may be taken. Ultimately, it is the regular normal teacher has to teach all these children with support services from special teachers, support services from parents, support services from community, support services from the technology enabled services, whatever comes handy, you can make use. It does not prohibit or exclude any of the services, including gadgets, but ultimately it is the responsibility of one teacher, of that classroom teacher, to take care of the needs of all these children. Thereby we will be able to eliminate the discrimination. That's the fundamental thing for inclusion. Non-discriminatory participation of all the children in the same regular school, regular normal classroom under the supervision and support and guidance of the classroom teacher. So with this, I take leave of you. We'll see you in the next session. Thank you.